Hi all, welcome to the video lecture series of Object-Oriented Programming. In this video lecture, we'll be discussing about how to suspend a thread, how to resume a suspended thread, and how to stop threads. We have a method named suspend inside the thread class in order to suspend a thread. What does suspending a thread means? To suspend means we are changing the state of thread from running to waiting state. We know the life cycle of a thread. A thread has got 5 different states. One among those states is the waiting state. So when we use a suspend method, we are actually changing the state of a thread from running to waiting state. So we can make use of this method if we want our thread to stop its execution for some time, and if we want to start it again after, say, an event occurred. So if we want to wait or we want to stop our thread for a short period of time, and then we have to resume back after an event occurs. In such situations, we can make use of this method named suspend. So when we call this method suspend, the thread will be temporarily stopped. So we can use this method if you want to cease the execution of a thread temporarily. Okay. Once a thread is suspended, we can start it again by calling the resume method. So once a thread is suspended, if you want that thread to start again, we have to make use of the resume method. And the syntax of suspend method is like this: public final void suspend. We will see an example of how the suspend method work. In this example, we have created one class. The class name is Java Suspend exp, and it is actually a child class of class thread. So thread is a parent class and Java Suspend exp is the child class of thread. So Java Suspend exp is also a thread. As you can see, for every thread, if you are extending the thread class, if you are creating a class that extends the thread class, we must override the run method. So we have written the run method inside this class, and inside the run method we have for loop, and these are the things that must be done when the thread starts working. So we are creating 3 objects of class Java Suspend exp here, named T1, T2, T3. Since Java Suspend exp is a thread, all these T1, T2 and T3 will be threads itself. So our threads are T1, T2 and T3. If you are not giving any name to a thread, by default the Java compiler will give, or Java virtual machine will give a name starting from thread 0, thread 1, thread 2, etc. It goes on like that. So the name of first thread will be thread 0, second thread will be thread 1, third will be thread 2, like that. Like we index our array elements, the indexing starts from 0. Similarly, the default thread names starts from 0, thread 0, thread 1, thread 2, thread 3. It goes on like that. So here T1 will be thread 0, T2 will be thread 1, and T3 will be thread 2. And once we create the threads, we have to call the start method, then only thread will start working. So we are calling T1.start and T2.start. Okay. So when we call the start method, the corresponding run method will be executed. So when we call T1.start, it is printing it is first of all asking the thread to sleep for 500 milliseconds. So the thread T1 will sleep for half a second. 500 milliseconds means half a second. So T1 will sleep for half a second, and then it prints the thread name. So we will be getting the output as thread 0, and then it prints system.out.println the value of I. The value of I will be 1, starting from 1. Since it's a for loop, it's starting from 1, so it will be printing 1. Okay. So meanwhile, thread 2 also is started. We are starting thread 2. Okay. Then it will run, and it is sleeping, right? At that moment it will come back here. Here we are asking to suspend the thread T2. So the thread T2 was started, and soon after it is suspended by calling the suspend method. Now the T2 will move from the running state to the waiting state. So now the thread T2 is waiting, and then we started the third thread, that is T3. So when we call T3.start, it again executes a run method. Again the T3 will sleep for 500 milliseconds. okay, and then it prints the name of the thread T3. So we'll be getting the output as thread 2. As you can see, the output, we are getting the outputs like this. Because we have used the for loop here, we are printing the thread name as well as the value of variable I. That is why we are getting output like this. But as you can see, there is no thread 1 in this output. Why? Thread 1 is our T2, but T2 is suspended now. Since T2 is suspended, we have only two running threads. They are T1 and T3. T1 is thread 0 and T3 is thread 2. And it will continue as long as this loop runs. This loop will be running from I equal to 1 to I equal to 4. So when the value of I becomes 5, the loop terminates. Then the run method is completed. Then the thread 0 and thread 2 will be terminated. As we can see, we are writing these statements inside a try catch block. If any exception occurs, then this catch block will handle that exception. But as you can see in the output, we have not received any exception, so we are getting the proper output. So this program explains how the suspend method work. We started the thread, we suspended it. When we suspend the thread will be moving from the running state to waiting state. The thread will wait there in the waiting state itself as long as the resume method is invoked. And how the resume method work, that is what we are going to see next. I hope, as mentioned just now, we have the resume method. The resume method is used to invoke the thread that is suspended. So one point we have to remember is we can use the resume method only if the thread is suspended by using the suspend method. So all the threads that are suspended by using the suspend method can be started again by using the resume method. And syntax of resume method is like this: public void final void resume. So that's an important point that we have to keep in mind, that is the resume method is used only with the suspend method. That means we can start the thread that was suspended using suspend method by using the resume method. If the thread was suspended by something else, we cannot use the resume method to start it again. I hope it is clear. We will see an example of how suspend and resume method work together. This is the same program that we have seen in the case of suspend method. So we have the class that extends thread. So this is also a thread. We have the run method overridden inside the class. We have created three threads, T1, T2 and T3, and we call T1.start. When this method is invoked, as mentioned earlier, it is actually called in the run method. So inside run method we are starting a for loop and we are asking the thread to sleep. So initially it is thread T1 that is called in the start method. So now we are asking thread T1 to sleep for half a second, that is 500 milliseconds. At that time our thread T2 will start. So when we call T2.start, it is again the run method of T2 that starts execution. Inside the run method of T2 we are asking T2 to sleep again for 500 milliseconds. So when T2 starts sleeping, the 500 milliseconds of T1 will be over, so T1 will be awake. So we are printing the first. So the system.out.println of T1 will work. So it will print thread 0 and the value of I, that is thread 1. After that, what happens? By that time, the sleeping time of T2 will be over. Then the next line, that is, we are suspending the thread T2. So our thread T2, that is thread 1, is now in the waiting state. And then we started T3. Okay. So we are getting the output as thread 2. I told you, since we are not giving the thread name, the default names of thread will start from thread 0, thread 1, thread 2 will go like that. So here T1 is thread 0, T2 is thread 1 and T3 is thread 2. Since T2 suspended, we will not get the output of thread 1 here. Okay. So now we are getting thread 2 because T3 started, and so we are getting the output as thread 2, 1. After that we are resuming T2. So now our thread 1 will start again. So now we are getting the output as thread 1, 1. Now all threads will work together parallelly. Thread 0, 2, thread 2, 2 and thread 1 also 2. Similarly, it will go up to when the value of I becomes 5, the loop will terminate and the threads also will terminate. So here we have suspended the thread T2. by using the method suspend, and we have resumed that thread by using the method resume. So resume method can be used only for starting the thread that was suspended using the suspend method. Okay, and I hope you got a clear idea about how we got this output. We are getting thread 0 and thread 2 initially because thread 0 is T1 and thread 2 is T3. T2 is thread 1 but it is suspended, so we not get the thread 1 initially, but later on we are resuming the thread, so then we'll start getting the output thread 1 here in the output screen. The last method is a stop method. It is used to terminate the thread execution. So if we call the stop method, the thread will stop there itself. It will terminate the thread execution. Once a thread is stopped, we cannot restart it by calling the start method again. So once a thread is stopped, it is stopped forever. In this example, we are using the stop method for thread 3, that is T3. As you can see here, T1 we started the thread T1, we started T2 also, but we stopped T3. So once T3 stopped, T3 will never start again. We cannot restart it by calling the start method again. So when we execute this program, we'll be getting the output as thread 0 and thread 1. Thread 2 will not be there. Thread 0 is T1 and thread 1 is T2 and thread 2 is T3. But in the output that we are going to get when we execute this program, thread 2 will not be there because we stopped the thread T3. I hope you understood. The remaining output remains same as in the previous case, except thread 2 and its corresponding values from 1, 2, 3, 4. We shall conclude now. In this video lecture, we discussed about how to suspend a thread, how to resume a suspended thread, how to stop a thread, what the difference between suspending, resuming and stopping a thread, the methods that are available inside the thread class for doing all these operations, etc. We also saw some of the examples. That is all in this video lecture. Thank you so much.